"Now one can breathe more easily," said the knight, putting back his shaggy hair with both hands, and turning his gentle face and large mild eyes to Alice. She thought she had never seen such a strange-looking soldier in all her life. He was dressed in tin armor, which seemed to fit him very badly, and he had a strange-shaped little deal box fastened across his shoulder, upside down, and with the lid hanging open. Alice looked at it with great curiosity. "I see you're admiring my little box," the knight said in a friendly tone. "It's my own invention, to keep clothes and sandwiches in. You see, I carry it upside down, so that the rain can't get in." "But the things can get out," Alice gently remarked. "Do you know the lid's open?" "I didn't know it," the knight said, a shade of vexation passing over his face. "Then all the things must have fallen out, and the box is no use without them." He unfastened it as he spoke, and was just going to throw it into the bushes when a sudden thought seemed to strike him, and he hung it carefully on a tree. "Can you guess why I did that?" he said to Alice. Alice shook her head. "In hopes some bees may make a nest in it. Then I should get the honey." "But you've got a beehive, or something like one, fastened to the saddle," said Alice. "Yes, it's a very good beehive," the knight said in a discontented tone. "One of the best kind. But not a single bee has come near it yet. And the other thing is a mouse-trap. I suppose the mice keep the bees out, or the bees keep the mice out. I don't know which." "I was wondering what the mouse-trap was for," said Alice. "It isn't very likely there would be any mice on the horse's back." "Not very likely, perhaps," said the knight. "But if they do come, I don't choose to have them running all about. You see," he went on after a pause, "it's as well to be provided for everything. That's the reason the horse has all those anklets round his feet." "But what are they for?" Alice asked, in a tone of great curiosity. "To guard against the bites of sharks," the knight replied. "It's an invention of my own. And now help me on. I'll go with you to the end of the wood. What's the dish for?" "It's meant for plum cake," said Alice. "We'd better take it with us," the knight said. "It'll come in handy if we find any plum cake. Help me to get it into this bag." This took a very long time to manage, though Alice held the bag open very carefully, because the knight was so very awkward in putting in the dish. The first 2 or 3 times that he tried, he fell in himself instead. "It's rather a tight fit, you see," he said, as they got it in at last. "There are so many candlesticks in the bag." And he hung it to the saddle, which was already loaded with bunches of carrots and fire irons and many other things. "I hope you've got your hair well fastened on," he continued, as they set off. "Only in the usual way," Alice said, smiling. "That's hardly enough," he said anxiously. "You see, the wind is so very strong here. It's as strong as soup." "Have you invented a plan for keeping the hair from being blown off?" Alice inquired. "Not yet," said the knight, but I've got a plan for keeping it from falling off." "I should like to hear it very much." "First, you take an upright stick," said the knight. "Then you make your hair creep up it, like a fruit tree. Now the reason the hair falls off is because it hangs down. Things never fall upwards, you know. It's a plan of my own invention. You may try it if you like." It didn't sound like a comfortable plan, Alice thought, and for a few minutes she walked on in silence, puzzling over the idea, and every now and then stopping to help the poor knight, who certainly was not a good rider. Whenever the horse stopped, which it did very often, he fell off in front, and whenever it went on again, which it generally did rather suddenly, he fell off behind. Otherwise he kept on pretty well, except that he had a habit of now and then falling off sideways, and as he generally did this on the side on which Alice was walking, she soon found that it was the best plan not to walk quite close to the horse. "I'm afraid you've not had much practice in riding," she ventured to say, as she was helping him up from his 5th tumble. The knight looked very much surprised and a little offended at the remark. "What makes you say that?" he asked, as he scrambled back into the saddle, keeping hold of Alice's hair with one hand to save himself from falling over on the other side. "Because people don't fall off quite so often when they've had much practice." "I've had plenty of practice," the knight said very gravely. "Plenty of practice." Alice could think of nothing better to say than, "Indeed," but she said it as heartily as she could. They went on a little way in silence after this, the knight with his eyes shut, muttering to himself, and Alice watching anxiously for the next tumble. "The great art of riding," the knight suddenly began in a loud voice, waving his right arm as he spoke, "is to keep—" Here the sentence ended as suddenly as it had begun, as the knight fell heavily on the top of his head, exactly in the path where Alice was walking. She was quite frightened this time, and said in an anxious tone, as she picked him up, "I hope no bones are broken." "None to speak of," the knight said, as if he didn't mind breaking 2 or 3 of them. "The great art of riding, as I was saying, is to keep your balance properly, like this, you know." He let go the bridle and stretched out both his arms to show Alice what he meant, and this time he fell flat on his back, right under the horse's feet. "Plenty of practice," he went on repeating, all the time that Alice was getting him on his feet again. "Plenty of practice." "It's too ridiculous," cried Alice, losing all her patience this time. "You ought to have a wooden horse on wheels, you ought." "Does that kind go smoothly?" the knight asked in a tone of great interest, clasping his arms round the horse's neck as he spoke, just in time to save himself from tumbling off again. "Much more smoothly than a live horse," Alice said, with a little scream of laughter, in spite of all she could do to prevent it. "I'll get one," the knight said thoughtfully to himself. "1 or 2, several." There was a short silence after this, and then the knight went on again. I'm a great hand at inventing things. Now, I dare say you noticed that last time you picked me up that I was looking rather thoughtful. You were a little grave, said Alice. Well, just then I was inventing a new way of getting over a gate. Would you like to hear it?